G'day everyone, Dicko here with another kick-ass walkthrough. With the new year already in full swing, it's time to talk about a topic that I probably get asked about the most, and that is animation. And this isn't going to be some piddly little 5 or 10 part series. It's going to be an ongoing topic for the majority of the year. I'm going to kick it off by demystifying some of this shit and hopefully kill off any poor misconceptions in the process. Animation is a massive medium that spans the gamut of shitty little GIFs to full-blown realism and all the complexity that brings. So it demands this kind of attention. And just like my modeling series, you just can't start running if you don't know how to walk. And with animation, that is literally the case. If you know nothing at all, please watch this video first before even thinking about picking up a pen or opening up your animation software. It's time to explore what makes good animation, well, good. So yes, I do want to start out by acknowledging that there are plenty of video essays out there about animation. And a lot of those animation videos tend to point out to the famous so-called 12 principles of animation, and then treat them as some sort of crazy metric on how to separate good animations out there from the bad. The worst videos out there, however, will literally walk through every part of that list and eviscerate a show or a film as a means to justify their hatred for something. And all I can say is that these videos are fucking moronic, and you should spend your time doing or watching better things. So, for those who haven't even heard of those principles, what are the 12 principles of animation? Well, they originate from the book The Illusion of Life by Disney animators Ollie Johnston and Frank Thomas, and in a nutshell, they are the following: squash and stretch, anticipation, staging, straight ahead action, pose to pose, follow through, slow in and slow out, arcs, secondary action, timing, exaggeration, solid drawing, and finally, appeal. I'll keep a more thorough breakdown of that list for another video, but I do want to hammer home just one of those on the list, and that is appeal. An appeal is something, in my opinion, that is super important. So in the book, appeal is more or less treated as a design principle, a technical metric that can be achieved through a strong understanding of the visual craft and the character you're animating. I mean, it's not wrong, but I think there's more to it than that, at least in a modern context. So why is appeal so important in my opinion? Well, simply put, there are just too many examples of what you would call objectively shitty looking animations out there that we all absolutely love. They make us laugh, they make us cry, and we share these things with everyone we know around the world, and no one seems to bat an eye about whether or not the actual quality of the animation is any good. It may not have the production value of a multi-million-dollar Pixar film or the fidelity of a Marvel VFX shot, and yet they seem to connect with us on sometimes an even greater level than those films can ever hope to achieve. I mean, sometimes in fact, it almost seems like the higher the quality of the animation, the less appealing it can become. I guess you can call it the you're working too hard effect or something like that. So, for example, I absolutely love the earlier seasons of South Park. It seems like the crudeness of the animation, the crappier animation, the shittier art and sound design and movement for some reason makes the show funnier than the more recent ones. It's like all those qualities in the humor of the script has permeated into the crudeness of the animation, and it makes the jokes hit harder for some reason. The same thing can be said about The Simpsons. Part of the reason, in my opinion, as to why the show just isn't as funny as it used to be can be partly attributed to the idea that the characters simply aren't drawn in funny ways anymore. It simply has become too polished for its own good, and that leads to a disconnect. So that is essentially the reason why I think appeal is by and away the single most important thing you can consider to measure the quality of your own animations. Furthermore, it's also the most subjective, circumstantial, and ethereal concepts to grasp. When something doesn't click, you just feel it in your gut. When you go to show something to an unwitting viewer, they can either look at it in awe, they can laugh or get lost in the story, or they can kind of grimace and cringe or look perplexed. A personal example of this happened to me when I was showing my own graduate film at a film festival a few years ago, and a small number of the audience laughed at a moment that wasn't really intended to be funny. Was it because of the shitty animation or because the script was just too cringy to stifle a chuckle? I will never know. However, I felt exactly the way they felt in that moment. So how then can you even measure the appeal of an animation? Well, to me, the appeal of an animation is the combination of two things. It's the successful balance between intent and outcome. If you can pull this off, then the other 11 rules of animation can be abandoned, they can be flushed down the fucking toilet, or with the right intention in mind, you can use them to enhance the appeal of your animation. So let's just put it in this imaginary context. So we have a set of scales, right? And on one side, we have the intention of the animation. What do you want to get out of that animation to be successful? And on the other side, we have the technical quality of that animation, the amount of polish you've added to that animation. And the balance of those two on the scales is the emotional outcome, right? So when it's in balance, you have a good level of appeal. However, if any of those two are out of balance, so say the quality of the animation isn't good enough to match the intention of the animation, or if you added too much polish and made it too slick for its own good, it also breaks the balance. So it leads to that disconnect in appeal. That's how I kind of see it. So with that in mind, I think that this is a much simpler, I guess you can call, metric for new animators to start from. No longer are you having to burden yourself with all of these crazy fucking principles to try and live by and check off a box. When I look at it in this context, I can see the forest from the trees and remind myself that I don't have to have an army of writers, designers, and animators around me to pull off a piece of art that people can enjoy. It might not end up being a masterpiece, but I can at least rest easy knowing that I didn't accidentally create the sequel to The Room or something like that. Now, all I need to worry about is whether I have an idea that I want to execute, and given the time and skills that I have, what can I do to execute those ideas successfully? Suddenly the goal isn't to make so-called good animation, it's simply to make an animation style that fits my story and the emotional outcome that I have intended as an artist. However, it can be easier said than done. So for instance, in my opinion, comedy lends itself really nicely to shitty or rather crude animation. However, emotional, introspective, arty, serious stories generally do not, although there are exceptions. But every fucking year, countless animation students around the world will have this grand, emotional, heartfelt, topical animated film in mind, and then they would go ahead and start to animate it, not realizing that animating subtle animation and emotion is probably one of the most difficult things you can do. And then they finish their animation, and every time it's shown, anyone who watches that animation, a little bit inside of them dies from cringe. And for those who are thinking about doing action set pieces, it's really dependent on the balance of the kind of action you're doing. So if it's comedic action or straight up hardcore action set pieces, generally speaking, you want to have something a bit slick, a little bit clean, but you can go ahead and do crappy animation depending on how comedic it is. So let's use a little metaphor to help sort of hammer home this concept of balance and context. For the men out there, you're going to a fancy cocktail party. It's a black tie event. You do not want to go into that party wearing a black Adidas tracksuit and a t-shirt tux. You're just going to look like a complete idiot. And for the ladies out there, you are not going to go to your best friend's wedding wearing a white dress. It's just not on. Uncool. Context is king here. So for instance, that Adidas tracksuit will fit absolutely perfectly in a house party piss up. And that white cocktail dress will fit perfectly at a nightclub. When and how you wear it determines the rest of the evening, how it will play out. So back to the question on how to actually add appeal to your animation. How do you find the right style to fit your story? Well, that is the hardest part. You need to really look at yourself and look at the resources you have. You've got a computer, yes, but is it fast enough to handle ultra high poly counts, simulation, and like ridiculously high resolution textures? Or yes, you may be really good at modeling those ultra realistic characters, but do you really know how to make them move with the same realism and fidelity that you've put into those 3D models? Another question you may need to ask yourself is just how much time do you have available in order to create this story? And as a side note, you will probably need more time than you think to get it done. So with that in mind, you may need to adjust your scope. And then once you've passed that first milestone, your next project can be more ambitious. When you are starting out as an animator, your skill set is pretty limited and your eyes need to be trained to look at animation in a certain way. It's just like going to the gym. You can't just pack on a bunch of 20 kilo plates on a barbell and expect to squat 100, 150 kilos on the first day at the gym. You have to start small, then build yourself up over time. So just like that, in animation, start small. Start with a ball bounce, a blink, a jump, a face going from happy to sad. Put all you can into that one small goal and then push it until you can show it to someone and they say, holy crap, that's awesome. So for instance, my most popular Twitter post is literally my character Evie turning her head with a blink and then having a small smile at the camera. For some reason, it has or did resonate with people. What I mean to say is that appeal doesn't have to be grandiose and it doesn't need to take years to refine. It just has to connect with the audience. So tell yourself, what do you want the audience to feel from this action? From there, you can take those next steps. Designing a character, planning your shot, blocking your animatic, or creating and finding reference. All of those things become way easier when you are really clear in the intention of the outcome. And this is one of the most important things that I'm going to be hammering home throughout the videos over the next year or so. And these thoughts aren't just for you to think about when starting your animation journey. This is also for me to remind myself going forward what I want to do over the next 12 months. Because not only do I want to help you folks figure out how to learn animation, I also want to expand on my skill set. Because by the end of the year, I want to achieve a bunch of things on a personal level. And those things are the following. Firstly, I want to finish the first part of my short film series, Black Curtain. Finally, I want to get the fucking thing done and hopefully be on the way to finishing the second part. The second thing I want to do is refine my own animation skill set, get better at the craft. And thirdly, I want to completely revamp my showreel with 100% new content. No reused stuff, no commercial projects, just pure personal work that I can be proud with. So with that in mind, I got a shitload of work to do. So for most of the year, this channel will be chock-a-block full of animation tutorial content, from the absolute basics to some of the most esoteric shit you can imagine. I want this channel to sort of be the first port of call for any new artist who wishes to learn about animation. And just like my modeling for animation videos, I can see where the gaps in knowledge lie around the YouTube sphere. And although there are some really cool videos out there, some really nice gems, they are hard to find and they can be pretty inconsistent coming from an array of artists from every single field you can think of. So basically I want to consolidate some of that and make it easier for you to access. So there's lesson one. It's all about the appeal. And here's the thing, although what I just said comes from a personal perspective, I'm really curious about what you people think about this. And if there are any other professional animators out there who wish to chip in with their thoughts, that is something I'm very interested to hear about. Anyway, I hope you're excited for the next few videos. I definitely am. And so until the next one, I'm going to say catches and have fun. Cheers.